Our guest this hour is Dr. Webster Tarpley, no stranger to the program. He is a philosopher of history who seeks to provide the programs and strategies needed to overcome the current world crisis. He came to prominence with a book called George Bush, the Unauthorized Biography. He's written a number of other books, including one about Barack Obama that is titled The Obama Presidency Controlled by Wall Street, with Obama, the Postmodern Coup, the Making of a Manchurian Candidate, and Barack H. Obama. So he's looked at history from all sides of the equation. Dr. Tarpley, welcome back to the program. How are you, sir?
Thank you so much. I'm very glad to be with you.
All right. I want to ask you about ISIS, first of all. Who created ISIS, and what role did the federal government, or at least the spy apparatus of the federal government, have in creating ISIS?
Well, we're very fortunate to have it directly from Vice President Joe Biden, speaking at Harvard University Kennedy School of Government last Friday, where he pointed out that ISIS was created, essentially funded and promoted by three countries that he mentioned: Saudi Arabia, the money; Turkey, the border, the logistics, other help; and the United Arab Emirates, the so-called Emiratis, also for money and political support and so forth. And he went through the idea that these countries, and I think we can see it's a little bit broader. It includes places like Kuwait that should still be overflowing with gratitude towards us for having reinstalled that dynasty on their throne back more than 20 years ago, and others, right, the different ones in the Gulf, right? Let's say the reactionary Gulf monarchies. All of those countries were so obsessed with the idea of overthrowing Bashar Assad, the secular and relatively modern government of Syria. They were so fixated on overthrowing Assad that they funded, as Biden put it, Al-Qaeda, which is already enough, and this Nusra, which is a branch of Al-Qaeda. So what we're talking about is the Siamese twins, the precursors and friends and alter egos of ISIS. And of course, the Turkish president had freaked out. Erdogan of Turkey, right, who thinks that he actually thinks that he's going to be the caliph. He wants to be the sultan of a new Ottoman empire, and if he's that, then I guess he's also the caliph. But he uses ISIS and the caliphate, which is what they've declared, to try to attack his enemies. So he freaked out, saying, "How dare you say this? I want an apology. You take that back." Then he said, "No armed person has ever gone across the border from Turkey to Syria." I think, that's about 500 miles of border, so I think you can realize how ridiculous, how absurd such a statement is. So, and then, of course, Biden did apologize, which is crazy. But Biden has told us some truth, and I've just been listening to the Sunday radio talk shows, and they don't say anything about this interesting outburst by Biden. I think he went off the reservation. He threw away the script. I don't know why. He does that from time to time. I'm not sure whether it's, a carefully calculated statement, a warning to Saudi Arabia or a warning to Turkey. It could be those things too, but we'll have to wait and see. But as of right now, we know that the rebellion, the insurrection in Syria is not indigenous, it's not grassroots, it's artificial, it comes from outside, it comes from the Saudi monarchy, the Emirates, who are a group of emirs, right, or little kings or princes, and this Turkish regime of Erdogan, which is very close to the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, I'm afraid that Senator Biden left out, Vice President Biden left out one important fact, was that the CIA, of course, orchestrated much of this, right? We knew years ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, that there were CIA managers sort of routing the equipment and the fighters that came into southern Turkey, some of them at NATO bases, and sending them into northern Syria. And a lot of the people that are fighting in Syria today are the same ones who were fighting for NATO against Colonel Gaddafi in Libya in 2011, and they were then massively transshipped into Turkey and Syria. And of course, Benghazi is rooted in that. The Benghazi incident was that Ambassador Stevens, in his last meeting on this earth, was meeting with the Turkish consul in Benghazi. So from the main area of terrorism and terrorists in Libya, he was shifting these fighters over into Turkey, and he was working out the details with a Turkish diplomatic representative. So I think we now know, if we just add in the last part of what I've said, what this is.
Yeah, but mainstream media doesn't bother to tell us that. If you will hold on for a second, we need to take this first break of the hour. We'll be right back with more from Dr. Webster Tarpley. KDK Radio News Time 419. Dr. Webster Tarpley is our guest. He's an American historian who tries to put history in a context where we can understand the crises that we face today. In terms of trying to understand these crises, President Obama, when he was campaigning, talked about ending wars in Iraq, but it seems as though he's ramping them back up, talked about attacking Syria. You write about the Secret Service crises that the First Family and the White House have faced, and that you think that these are the warmongers who are really trying to send him a message. What do you mean, sir?
I would say that Obama was put into power by a group of people from the Trilateral Commission and so forth who thought that he was going to be much more obedient to them when it came to their demands for wars, surges, escalations, wider wars, and so forth, and that they're not happy with him. In other words, one of the main points that the establishment harps on is that Obama is not enough of a warmonger. Therefore, I would recommend to people, don't worry about criticizing Obama. Worry about counterattacking the people who are demanding the wider war. Somebody like John McCain, who is on record meeting with ISIS terrorists in Syria.
You have a photograph of him on your website meeting with those people.
And there's one of them he's meeting with a cannibal. He's meeting with the guy who cut out the heart of a dead Shiite militiaman or Syrian soldier in different accounts and pulled out his heart and a piece of lung and started eating it on camera. You can find that. McCain sat down. I don't know whether he got in there for lunch, but you can imagine, right? You're sitting down with a cannibal, a kidnapper, a guy who had 10 Shiite pilgrims that he was holding for ransom, threatening to kill them, maybe behead them. And then the caliph, he sat down with a guy who was at that time that he sat down with McCain, an Al-Qaeda terrorist on the U.S. wanted list, multi-million-dollar reward. He was at the same time Baghdadi, the head of the ISIS group, and he's now the caliph. He's Caliph Ibrahim, the emperor of the world, according to this group, and that's somebody that McCain has sat down with. So what I find amazing is that the Democratic Party could knock the Republicans for a loop in these elections if they exposed what McCain in particular, but also Lindsey Graham and others have done in the way of fraternizing with known terrorists.
Why won't they do that? Why won't they do that?
I guess it's cowardice. I guess they're afraid of this group, and one might well be. Let me just go back since we've had this question with the Secret Service, right? Why don't they work? The starting point of wisdom, I would say, is an article in the New York Times on October 2nd by Peter Baker. Some blacks see Secret Service as flawed shield for president. Now, here we have people of some note, right? Representative Elijah Cummings of Maryland, not far from here.
He was on TV today talking about how many people approach him who believe that exact same thing.
Right. We got Emmanuel Cleaver of Missouri and so forth. Now, their idea is that there's a race-based, racist component to the fact that the Secret Service doesn't protect Obama, and I think that's absolutely correct.
Well, he denied that today, though.
Well, I guess maybe he got some messages overnight too, right? Maybe somebody was on his lawn. I don't know. But this is now a climate of threats. Certainly, the threat of force is not far from the surface here in Washington D.C. But the thing I would point out is there's an animus against Obama. That's clear enough. There had been an animus against Clinton in the past. We could go through that if we had time. I don't think we do. But the thing I would point out is that when you look at these incidents, these are political statements. They are means of exerting political pressure on Obama. It's blackmail. It's to goad him to do things that the war party or the rogue network or this invisible government, secret government, parallel government, deep state wants. I'll just give you three examples. In December of 2009, right? Obama, fresh into office, he's going to give a speech at West Point. What is he going to do about Afghanistan after a long review? In November 2009, we had these two adventurers, right? The Salahis, this couple, man and woman, waltz into the state dinner for Prime Minister Singh of India, right? So this is a message to Obama. You have no screen. Then Obama goes to West Point. He gives a speech where he says, I'm going to have a surge in Afghanistan, which they like to hear, and I'm going to have a date for pulling out. And this they didn't want to hear. And then right after that, we had this, the underwear bomber, right? Christmas Day 2009, Mutalab, the underwear bomber, in the skies over Detroit, making Obama look all of a sudden very bad. And I would direct people to my website, tarpley.net. I followed the revelations. One night on MSNBC, Richard Wolff came out and said the Obama White House thinks that this terrorism was deliberately allowed. Somebody let it happen on purpose, or maybe made it happen on purpose, in order to discredit Obama and to create problems for the administration. That's a good one. I think it shows how they operate. Here's another one. This is the one we just heard about. On 11/11/11, November 11th, 2011, 7 shots were fired from the ellipse, 700 yards from the White House, and they hit the south facade, the Truman balcony on the south side of the White House, right, the one that faces the Washington Monument. 7 shots. A Secret Service supervisor says immediately, no shots were fired, and a maid finds the bullets and the damage several days later. Well, what's the context for that? On October 21st, about, 3 weeks earlier, Obama had announced a firm commitment to a total pullout from Iraq. War party, not happy. Then we have the 7 shots. And then after that, in the middle of it all, there was also this question, what I mentioned before, the airlift of jihadis and terrorists from Libya to Turkey and therefore to Syria, and their equipment. And if we look now at what happened this year has been an epic year because we've had the Syrian question, right? The war party. You can turn on one of the Sunday programs. Lindsey Graham wants to bomb Assad, bomb the Syrian Air Force, bomb the Syrian army. And in Ukraine, they're all screaming they want confrontation with Russia. They want Russia to back down. I think pretty soon, if things keep going in Hong Kong, we'll be hearing the same thing. Confrontation with China. We have a group of madmen, I would say, who have this war fetish going, and they're trying to put pressure on Obama to escalate these things. In March, 3 Secret Service people sent home from Amsterdam on a presidential trip because they were drunk. One of them passed out in the hall. The day after, 2 Secret Service, 2 counter snipers were put on leave after they were in a drunk driving crash in Florida. In June of this year, we have Obama in a gymnasium in Poland, and somebody secretly, surreptitiously films him in there. Well, that filming device could have been an explosive device. That could have been everything over right then.
And there have been tons of other incidents in that time with Secret Service agents in South America.
The Cartagena, that's a little bit earlier.
Yeah, I know, but there have been so many others, and I need to take this break on time, okay? Dr. Webster Tarpley is our guest. 1-866-391-1020 is our number. KDK Radio News Time, 4:33. Dr. Webster Griffin Tarpley is our guest. He's an American historian who puts history in a context that we can understand the crises that the country faces and indeed the world faces today. Dr. Tarpley, I'm sorry to have interrupted you, but you were giving us the rundown of why you think some of these Secret Service incidents are direct messages to President Obama.
Absolutely, and why 2014 has been such a scandalous, outrageous, bad year for these security threats to our president. And that is the question of Syria. It was clear at the beginning of the year that the Syrian terrorist rebels were in the process of being defeated. They were being systematically kicked out of their strongholds like Aleppo by the existing rather normal Syrian government. And then with the coup d'etat in Kiev around the middle of February, the U.S. had overthrown the existing government of Ukraine and insisted on installing a puppet government. and they wanted the war party, the rogue network, wanted that backed up. So Syria and Ukraine have dominated. They've hovered over all of these incidents this year. So again, Amsterdam in March, agents were drunk. Florida in March, agents were in a crash while driving drunk. Poland, a camera is allowed to stay in the area where the president is doing his workout. That's also extremely disturbing because that device could have been anything. September 16th, as we've just learned, Obama's at the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta, gets into an elevator, and the Secret Service has allowed a gun-toting felon who happens to be a security contractor for the CDC to get into the elevator. And to underline the threat, the guy, instead of just standing there where he might have attracted no attention, takes out a cell phone and starts filming Obama in what is supposed to be a private setting. And that's only when he gets fired and is told to give up his gun that the Secret Service apparently sees that he had this gun all along. Then we get to September 20th. We actually have not one but two incidents, right? The fence jumper who got into the East Room and the Green Room. Everybody's focused on that. But there was also a car. There was a car in this Pennsylvania Avenue blocked off area. This is actually much more dangerous because whatever an individual can carry, well, that could be very serious. But a potential car bomb, which is what every car has to be considered as, that in the area right in front of the White House, that's extremely dangerous. And then we've just gotten another one. On September 27th, when this whole brouhaha was already going on, we had a fake member of Congress impersonating a congressman from New Jersey get into a secure area near Obama here at the Washington, D.C. Convention Center. So I submit to you, that is too much incompetence for bungling. That is a pattern. And what we're trained to look for in these things is patterns. Individual cases can always be refuted. There's always something wrong with each of them. But when you have a pattern, that pattern takes on objective reality. And that's what we have here. And of course, it's a multi-year pattern. It goes back to Kennedy. It goes back to Roosevelt. I mean, we can't go through all that now, but check my website if you want to catch up on all that. But the idea is that these are political messages. And of course, the idea that the Secret Service is in chaos, that's fine. From the point of view of the secret government, they want an agency in chaos. All the more easily can they bootleg in their specific operations that aim at specific messages or worse. So I would say it's not enough to fire the director. You'd probably have to fire the top 4 or 5 layers of bureaucracy. Just send them into early retirement. And you'd probably also have to institute a system whereby one agency would be brought in to spy on the other agencies. And it was, instead of having the Secret Service only in charge of presidential security, you might want to bring in a military agency, right? The DIA, I don't know what, or the ATF, and have each one spy on the other.
You mentioned the Ukraine. About 2 weeks ago, I got into a heated discussion with one caller who listens to this station during the weekday times when more mainstream people are on than I. And they could not believe I was entertaining the idea that neo-Nazis were involved in the overthrow of the duly elected president there, and that they were wearing the Azimov Brigade and others were wearing neo-Nazi insignias, including the SS Waffen and the swastika, and waving these flags and killing people. What can you tell me about neo-Nazi involvement in the overthrow of that duly elected president?
The point is that in the west of the Ukraine, the part that's close to Poland and indeed to Czechoslovakia or Slovakia these days, there's a city called Lvov, L-V-O-V. It's sometimes written L-V-I-V, sometimes written Lemberg in German, sometimes called Leopolis in various languages. And this is a center of the people who, when Hitler came into the Soviet Union in the summer of 1941, welcomed him and actually formed an SS division and fought on the side of the Nazis against the Soviet Red Army. And as that tradition is very, very strong, that's the right sector, right? The people who are in power in Kiev today are very heavily drawn from that Western Ukrainian Lvov or Lviv area, Lemberg, and that's their tradition. And what we find, as you precisely mentioned, the Azov, A-Z-O-V, right, the Sea of Azov. Well, they have the Azov Battalion, and we have pictures. You can find them on the internet. Just type in Azov Battalion, and there you will find steel helmets with a Nazi swastika. Some of them have this double S, but it's a kind of a pointy double S. Those are called runes. That's supposedly an old Nordic or Norse kind of writing that the Nazis cultivated. And there's another one called the Wolfsangel, W-O-L-F-S-A-N-G-E-L, that they also sport. That's one of their favorite kinds of symbols. And in terms of ideology, they have all of that. And I would also add somebody like Poroshenko coming here. He wanted to get a lot of U.S. aid. He wanted modern tanks, modern aircraft, maybe modern naval vessels, helicopters. He had an immense shopping list. And according to what I've been able to learn, he got nothing. He was able to address the joint session of the U.S. Congress, which I think is a national calamity. It's a shame for the United States. But in terms of what he wanted, he didn't get anything. So that's why you see these incidents proliferating. Every time Obama does something that the war party does not like, and it's almost always not aggressive enough, not enough warmongering, and so forth, that's when they deliver a message with one of these incidents. And I'm sure Poroshenko went back home, wailing and complaining that he wanted billions upon billions of dollars of U.S. military hardware, and he didn't get it. And that's why the war party is so angry with Obama. They're actually apoplectic. You might have heard Lindsey Graham, 3-4 weeks ago saying, if Obama doesn't get it right, ISIS is coming over here and they're going to kill all of us. Well, that is absolutely absurd. That is raving. They have no such logistics. It's crazy. Look at those aggressors in the past, much better organized, couldn't do it. How can this group of, 30,000 psychotic patsies ever hope to cross the Atlantic Ocean and come in? And this leads us to this.
But people would point out that some people did on 9/11.
Well, that's a very long story. I've written a book about that. Take a look at it. You can order it through tarpley.net. My finding is that is not at all what happened, and even within that crazy frame of reference, the barriers to that are much greater, or should be much greater today than they were.
Yeah, I know. I've read some of the stuff that you've written about it. Let me ask you another question. The caller's hung up now, but they point out that you talk about Mr. Obama being threatened by warmongers, but they say President Reagan was shot under the protection of the Secret Service, and
yes,
he certainly was not light on treading against terrorism or anything else.
But that was a different issue, and it's very good that somebody brought that up. First of all, the idea that the Secret Service had a good reputation is absolutely insane. There is no such good reputation. When Franklin D. Roosevelt died under very suspicious circumstances, they allowed a Russian woman painter and her assistant, a man, to leave the premises at Warm Springs, Georgia, with a paint box that could have contained every poison known to man, but the Secret Service didn't care about it. In the case of Kennedy, you've seen that film where you have 4 Secret Service men, honest ones, on the corners of the limousine. A supervisor comes and tells them to get down. They protest. He insists. They do it, and within 5 minutes, Kennedy is dead. Now, in the case of Reagan, this is a very simple question. George H.W. Bush was vice president. He represented the CIA. So there was a vested interest for the CIA in helping Reagan out of office in order to help George H.W. Bush the elder, in. And I'm afraid you have to think in precisely these brutal terms. Similarly,
when you leave, sir, at the end of this hour, people are going to say, Chris, why did you have that conspiracy theorist on? When you're labeled like that, what do you say to people?
I say, look at the facts. This is just empirical. You don't go looking for conspiracies, but you have to tell what you find. And since we have an oligarchical system, we find these things that look like conspiracies. I'll give you another one. Gerald Ford, what was his problem? Similar, that Nelson Rockefeller, the great power in the CIA, the founder of a whole Latin American part of the CIA, really, was vice president. So what do we get with Gerald Ford? Lynette Squeaky Fromm takes pot shots. Sarah Jane Moore takes pot shots. So you can see what it is. Those were slightly different issues. Those are issues of power. In this case, I think it's more like policy. It's more about Syria, Ukraine, China, confrontation. And you don't need to guess about that. Look at what McCain says. Look at what Lindsey Graham says. Look at these people, and you'll see that's what the War Party wants, what they're demanding that Obama do. So much so that this has given rise to a movement on the social media, which I'm happy to report about. It goes like this: hashtag arrest McCain for ISIS, with the 4 being the number 4, right? Hashtag arrest McCain for ISIS. And I think that's not only the key to avoiding wider wars, but also to the domestic political situation, right? We've had Mitch McConnell of the Republicans has promised David Koch, Koch brother, whatever he calls himself, that if the Republicans take the Senate, there will be no help for students looking for help on their student loans. There will be no increase in the minimum wage. Heck, there may not be a minimum wage if the Republicans take the Senate, because with the House and the Senate, as McConnell explains on this tape, which also the Democrats are not using, I don't know why, but he explains that if you've just got 51 votes in the Senate, you can do everything you want on a budget reconciliation.
Somewhere Anne Rand is smiling, I think.
Anne Rand, yes.
All right, we have to take this break. We'll come back one more segment with Dr. Webster Tarpley. Our number is 1-866-391-1020. Call in right now. KDK Radio News Time 4:50. Dr. Webster Tarpley is our guest. We'll take your calls as soon as we can. Not much time remaining. I urge you to be brief in your answers. Dr. Tarpley, you do agree that there are a number of hardcore terrorists out there that need to be confronted, don't you?
You have got a hardcore of about 25,000 jihadis, I guess, by now, who were deployed under NATO auspices to overthrow Gaddafi in Libya, and Libya is now chaos and practically the end of the world.
Where every country we've invaded is like that. Now, they're not better off than when we invaded.
Although Libya is actually much worse off than Iraq, right? Part of the problem is where you have tribal structures. This is a bad thing if the central government is knocked out. The U.S. and NATO then shipped those crazies over into Turkey and sent them into Syria and Iraq, where they have now run wild. So we have a funny situation where the CIA has built up ISIS, and the U.S. Air Force and the Navy are trying to take it down. It's one of those situations. The Saudis have paid for ISIS, but they have to send planes to bomb them because they're now on the hot seat of world public opinion. So it's a very, very complicated situation. The only thing you can do is pick out the number one spokesperson for the War Party, and that's McCain, and concentrate the negativity on him. That's arrest McCain for ISIS. That faction looks something like this. You got McCain and Lindsey Graham up front. They're out in the open. Warmongers behind the scenes in the Obama administration. Skull and Bones John Kerry, Secretary of State. Samantha Power, the head of the humanitarian bombing group. You've got General Allen, an anti-Obama general who is now brought in by Kerry to run the policy on ISIS, if you can believe that. And that then links you. Kerry, Allen was one of the people forced out. Remember with the Paula Broadwell, Tampa, Jill Kelly event? Well, he's now been brought in through the back door. But this leads us then to General Petraeus, the head of this entire faction, I would say is Petraeus. He's their presidential candidate. And then you've got this Jack Keane, often on Fox News. This leads us to the world of the neocon think tanks. Frederick Kagan at the American Enterprise Institute. Jack Keane works for the Institute for the Study of War. And Robert Kagan had been Romney's biggest foreign policy advisor. So that's pretty much the faction that is attempting to have a wider war. Now, what their relation is to these incidents, of course, this is anybody's guess. But we can also, I think, see that there are other people, like Congressman Lamborn of Colorado has called for mutinies in the U.S. military. mass resignations for people who don't like Obama. That's a very, very subversive thing to be doing in wartime, right? I'm amazed that he has not been expelled from the House.
Which congressman is this?
Lamborn of Colorado, and you can find his picture on the front page of Tarpley.net, Tarpley.net. And that's, I guess, the other thing is if people want to get some background, go to Tarpley.net. I recommend that most. You can go to the Tax Wall Street Party website, and for Syria specifically, Hands Off Syria, and on Twitter it's No to Invasion. NO, the number 2 invasion.
All right. We have a minute left. What can we do? What can our listeners do? There are a ton of people we'll never get to who want to talk to you, but what can our listeners do?
Get on the social media. Arrest McCain for ISIS. Let that go viral. That's real big problem for the Warmonger Party. McCain is so far out on a limb with this stuff. It's unbelievable. He has actually said on Hannity one evening, he said, how can Rand Paul or some other congressman have an opinion about ISIS? They've never met with ISIS. And McCain saying, he met with ISIS, my God. And we're supposed to not negotiate with terrorists. So don't vote for warmongers. Vote against warmongers. I think you can see who they are. Neocons, right? They're largely Republican. But watch out for those humanitarian bombers on the Democratic Party side.
And one more time, your website, sir?
Tarpley.net. Tarpley.net.
Dr. Tarpley, it's always a pleasure. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Hope to see you soon.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.